Okay, we're talking about minor scales, minor keys, minor chords. We're going to start out with scales because we've been studying scales since the very first lesson. And as we learned in our last lesson, number 5, we covered the circle of fifths. And we learned that the minor keys are located on the inside of the circle. And that these are called relative minor keys because they're relative, they're minor keys relative to the major key that they're associated with, and they share the exact same notes in the scale. So, how do we go about finding minor scales on the mandolin, and how do we go about practicing minor scales on the mandolin? As I already mentioned, we're not going to share written tablature or anything in this lesson, but there are assignments to give, and there are things for you to do in order to learn how to play in minor keys. And so the first thing we do is we find the minor key, and then we practice that scale. We're going to start out, as we have from the beginning of this, in the key of G, or the scale of G. We're going to play that G scale. Now, you should have by now learned these scales and also tried to find ways to extend those scales all across the neck. We've been talking about that all along. So we're going to play that extended G scale as far as our pinkies will reach. And we're going to do it like this, starting on the G string. Now you noticed at the end of that scale, I played a G chord. Very simple G chord with these two fingers. If you don't know this yet, just look up how to play a two-fingered G chord. And it's very important. You'll notice in a lot of the earlier videos that at the end of the scale I might play the octave. Or I might just play these two strings open. That would be the first degree and the fifth degree of the scale. It's important when you play a scale that you keep in mind the tonic. You keep in mind the center of what you're doing. So if you're playing in G, you want to begin the scale on G, end the scale on G, play a chord of G, or play a double stop that fits the chord of G at the end of the scale, and that just keeps you centered in what it is you're playing. So now, how do you find the minor scale? We know that E minor is a relative minor of G, and E minor is an often used key in different bluegrass and folk music and all sorts of music, classical music. E minor is an often used key, and so it's a good one to start with. The relative minor is always built on the sixth degree of the scale. Whatever the sixth note is in a scale, that's the relative minor of that scale. So how do you find the sixth? Well, in any scale, let's say we're going to take that G scale. There's your first note. There's your second note. And because the mandolin is tuned in fifths, and because of what we've discussed in a previous lesson about the major tetrachord, we know that the number 2 note will be found, or the number 6 note will be found right below the number 2. Any scale you play anywhere on the mandolin, when you play the second note of it, the 6th of that scale will be directly below it. Just like the 5th of the scale will be directly below the 1st. So in the key of G, we want to find that 6, it's going to be right here. That's going to be the E note. Give us the E minor. So what we want to do now is we want to play that scale, particularly the extended scale, so that we can play from E to E. Now those are the same notes I played in the G scale, but you see what a difference the sound makes. And that's your E minor scale. So I'm playing the exact same notes that I played in the G scale. What I want you to do now is just monkey around on your mandolin playing that E minor scale, and you want to play an E minor chord when you finish that scale. To play the E minor chord, you've got the first of the chord here on the E, you've got the fifth of the chord here on the A, second fret, and then you've got a flatted third down here, which is the G note on the E string. Just play those three strings. Now because the G note is part of an E minor chord, you can play this open string. You're not going to hurt anything. It's actually part of the chord. Or you can add this B note here. But there's your E minor chord. We're going to talk more about chords in the next lesson. But in the meantime, I want you to work on that, playing that E minor scale. Now let's look at the D scale. The D scale. There's your number 2, and directly below it will be your number 6. You look at your circle of fifths, or puzzle it out here. You've got an A, you've got an A sharp or B flat, here you got a B. So here is the B, and if you look at the circle of fifths, the B is the relative minor of D. So let's work on that one for a while. There's another B. There's another B. 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 B minor. Okay, I'm going to try to do one more, and this time we're going to use the closed position. F minor is a, it's a cool key. So the relative major of F minor is A flat. The relative minor of A flat is F. So we're going to do the A flat. You remember that one? I think it was called G sharp in the book. We extend that on up. Okay. Now to find the relative minor again, you find the second note of the scale, you go one string up here, and you got the F note, and you got the F scale. So you play the same exact notes that you played in that A flat or G sharp scale. There you've got another F. F, half step above E. Play that just like the E minor. Of course, you can't use that open G string because it's not part of the chord. You could use that, or you could use this, or you could just play these three strings right here. You can see I'm not used to playing that scale, but that's okay. The point is to be able to find these and practice them, and we need to do them in all 12 keys, so believe me, I will be working on that. I just love learning about music and about the mandolin, and so I will be working on all these other scales. If you start the you can start the C scale from here, and your second note is that D, so you're going to be playing an A minor scale using the notes of the C. There's your A minor scale. Anyway, like I say, The cool thing about the knowledge of the tetrachords and the knowledge of the mandolin being tuned in fifths makes it fairly easy for us to find these relative minors from any scale. Another thing to understand is that when you start a scale, say this C and open in a closed position, you know there's only a half step between the 7 and the 8. That means your next note, if you go down in the scale, it's going to be 1 fret below. That's the 7 of the C scale. Here's your C, there's your 7, and your 6 will be 1 whole step below. So there's your relative minor of the C scale, which is the A. There's your next A right here. That wraps it up for the minor scales. We're talking about relative minors, and in the days, weeks, and years ahead, I hope that you will spend a little bit of time working out minor scales from all the major scales that we've already learned. Obviously, there's not nearly enough time to go into each one in a little video like this. I've already run way over what I prefer in a short video like this, and I hope that you don't get too bored with it or that it lasts too long. But we've shown you some of the ways that you can find where the relative minor is, and you use the same scale notes that you've already learned to play those minor scales. And I suggest that you try it. Monkey around on your mandolin with these scales. Practice. You may end up writing a song or coming up with some brand new licks that nobody's ever heard before. So I encourage you to do that. Take some time, monkey around, play around with the minor keys a little bit. You need to learn some minor chords to go along with those. And I'm hoping that the little bit of knowledge that we have, we're beginning to gain on the mandolin fingerboard, I'm hoping it'll help me to be able to find my way around more easily. And I'm certainly hoping that it's helping you, and that maybe some of these videos help shed a little bit of a light on it. In the next video, we're going to be discussing how to build minor chords. And so that one is coming right up next.